Do you think that just comes from humans' innate belief that we're special and different and unique in the universe, and that soul is that specialness?
I think that's a very big part of it, and that again is related to evolutionary biology as well. Because one of the curious facts of reality that we have to face is that you know if evolution is correct, and I really that's like saying if gravity is correct, I mean, or if mathematics is correct. I mean, it is correct. There's just no question. Then we are connected to all living things, and so the argument that we have this thing, this magical supernatural thing, and no other living creatures have it, is really very, very hard to
Mhm.
maintain.
Do you think that there's going to be an awakening, a revolution, some kind of breach in thinking with the rise of AI and artificial intelligence? Because how can you hold those two ideas as we're special and unique, we have a soul, and then you have now this conscience, sentient, if you want to believe that, AI, what do you think is going to go along with that?
Well, that's a wonderful question, Chase. I mean, the only honest answer is I don't know. And I don't think anyone else does either, but it's certainly about time for us to speculate and to think about it very seriously. I mean, the first step in that direction, I guess, the first question that most people raise is consciousness. Can, these large language models be conscious? Are they conscious now? Most people would say no, but they certainly do a pretty good job of simulating,
Hmm.
with consciousness. So I guess the first step in that rather dramatic and altogether appropriate question these days is, are these AI systems conscious? Will they become conscious? If they are conscious, what does that mean? Next step is to recognize that one of the major reasons you raised the question of, one reason that humans tend to not just believe in a soul, but have to assume that there's something like that is because they like to think of themselves as being different from other animals. Um, Beyond that, I mean, there are a number of other reasons why people uh, often overwhelmingly tend to believe in a soul, despite the fact that I would argue there's no evidence. Not only is there no evidence for it, but there's a great deal of downside associated with that belief. But an important reason that people do flock to the notion of the soul is the idea of consciousness. When they think about it, when they think about their own thinking, they think about their own awareness, their own consciousness, that can become a real mystery. And it is. It's maybe the greatest unsolved scientific mystery at this point that we're aware of, which is how do we explain consciousness? What we mean by that, and how does that work? And so there are people who embrace the idea of the soul as the explanation, what consciousness is all about. And so in that sense, to get back to your really very insightful, appropriate question, what about AI? Not only would AI be conscious at some point, whatever that means to be
Hmm.
conscious, we don't know that. But in addition to being conscious, whatever that is, would AI have a soul? My computer does not have a soul, as far as I can tell. It's not conscious. It's not conscious either. Although I sometimes speak of it as though it is.
Hmm.
I say, "Oh, my computer's screwed up. My computer's angry. My computer's lazy. My computer's, stop doing that." That kind of thing. Um, would we either imbue AI with a soul or feel that it has a soul? My dogs, I have 3 dogs that I love dearly, 4 cats and a horse. And, as far as I'm concerned, they all have consciousness, a rather sophisticated degree of consciousness. Do they have a soul? They don't have a soul any more than I have a soul, but I don't think they have a soul any less
Yeah.
than I do. I think they have consciousness, a significant amount of consciousness. Um, Whether consciousness and the soul can exist in a hardwired series of transistors, microprocessors, that rubs people the wrong way, almost as much as the idea that you or I don't have a soul.
Yeah.
You know, have wet stuff to have a soul. You got to have neurons and all this glot moving back and forth across neurons. As
Some
far
of
as
the
they're
some
both
of
the
the
same.
some of the ambitious timelines for conscious like AGI puts it as early as 2027, and then the general consensus is like conservative is going to be like 2035. That's at least what I've gathered. Is it's coming quick, and it's already interesting. You have people forming groups for advocating for artificial intelligence rights and stuff like that. And so I think we'll have a pretty interesting split and faction of people who see it both sides. Like, sure, it's sentient, but I'm still better because you don't have a soul. And then people are like, oh, it's sentient, you have a soul too. And then people who are like, oh, we both don't have souls. So
Right. Right. Well, one of the arguments again that I make in the book that I feel very strongly about the downside of a soul. Most people don't think about most people don't think about whether or not they have a soul. They just assume that they do, whatever that, but although they don't interrogate what that actually means. But one of the real downsides you talked about just now, well, they are some AI device say, well, it may be conscious in some sense, but it doesn't have a soul, and hence we can maltreat it or whatever. But one of the real downsides that exists right now and has existed historically of belief in a soul is that overwhelmingly the assumption has been that human beings have it and they don't. They mean animals. And that has given us essentially our marching orders for a long time to, in my view, really mistreat other members of the living community because they don't have a soul.
yeah.